Elon Musk back in the news, or maybe more accurately said, Elon Musk always in the news. But what is it now? Now it's not Twitter, Tesla, or going to Mars. It's banking. Word is that he is now eyeing Silicon Valley Bank, the one you know about. Just last week, the 16th largest bank in the nation, Silicon Valley Bank, collapsed. This after telling investors it needed to raise more than $2 billion to shore up its balance sheet. That scared everyone with business with SVB, sparking a rush of depositors to withdraw their money. SVB is now under the control of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Musk first showed interest in the bank by responding to gaming hardware company Razer CEO Min Lian Tan. That CEO tweeted, "I think Twitter should buy SVB and become a digital bank." Musk responded saying, "I'm open to the idea." Well, in late October, Musk took over Twitter and he's looking to add payments to the platform. SVB could potentially help him with that. And on Thursday, independent journalist Matt Taibbi and author Michael Shellenberger testified before the House Judiciary Select Committee on the weaponization of the federal government. Taibbi and Shellenberger, both journalists, published the Twitter files that they received from a source. In the hearing, Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett, non-voting member from the Virgin Islands, blasted both men, saying this.
The Republicans have brought in two of Elon Musk's public scribes to release cherry-picked, out-of-context emails and screenshots designed to promote his chosen narrative, Elon Musk's chosen narrative, that is now being parroted by the Republicans because the Republicans think that these witnesses will tell a story that's going to help them out politically.
Award-winning independent journalist Matt Taibbi joins me. Good evening, sir. And I wanted to talk to you because, and I played that soundbite because I must say I thought it was outrageous the way you were treated before that committee. You were testifying as a journalist, and I don't know how you characterize that experience, but what did you think about it?
Greta, I thought it was surreal, frankly. We expected to have a serious conversation about the material, which frankly is neither specifically a right nor a left issue, but instead like an episode of Veep broke out. It was crazy. They mostly spent the entire time going after the motives of both myself and Mr. Shellenberger. The words of the day were cherry-picked, money, and Elon Musk. And apart from that, there really was no content to a lot of the discussion.
All right, well, one of the other words they have is a so-called journalist. Listen to this. This is Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett referring to you and Shellenberger as so-called journalist.
Americans can see through this. Musk is helping you out politically, and you're going out of your way to promote and protect him and to praise him for his work. This isn't just a matter of what data was given to these so-called journalists before us now. There are many legitimate questions about where Musk got the financing to buy Twitter.
Yeah, so-called journalists. Well, tell me, I got to tell you, I would have loved to have gotten those Twitter files before you, and would be honored to be a quote so-called journalist if that's what it is to get a big story and to break it. Tell me this: have any news organizations supported you, come out publicly and said Matt Taibbi and Mr. Shellenberger were doing their job as journalists? They got information and they published it.
Out of the mainstream journalists, apart from the conservative media, none, and which is really remarkable, again, because these stories are clearly newsworthy. They're not particularly partisan, the bulk of them. And these attacks on myself and Mr. Shellenberger, it's the kind of thing that drove the mainstream media wild when Donald Trump was in office. There would have been days and days of headlines about this kind of thing back then. Now there's total unconcern about it. But I've been really troubled throughout this entire period by the lack of kind of esprit de corps among reporters about the story. Normally when you get a big story, you want the cavalry to come to help investigate it, and nobody did. And I think that's been a very troubling aspect.
Well, you know, there are international organizations that when journalists get locked up around the country, you know, we rally behind them. You know, here is that, you know, that the heavy-handed insults that you received before that committee were quite shocking. Did any journalists reach out to you privately, which I might find more offensive, that they didn't have the guts to say it to you publicly, that they thought you did a good job?
Oh, I had many journalists reach out to me privately. A lot of friends of mine. I know a lot of people in the business who still have paying jobs and are still worried that they They might get into trouble with their editors if they say anything, in favor of us publicly. I understand that. I mean, it's not particularly wonderful,
don't understand
but
that.
it's a fact of the business now.
Matt, I do not understand that. They're all on Twitter. They could all publicly come out and support you. I always say, never hire a lawyer who's afraid of a judge. Never believe a journalist who's afraid of the crowd, the echo chamber, or his boss. That is the worst kind of journalist. That journalist is going to sell you out in a second and put his head under a rock. So I think it's actually more offensive for the ones to behind the scenes say attaboy to you. I think that's worse. They're the worst cowards to be.
Well, I mean, there is an element to that I totally agree with. I mean, part of what being a good journalist is all about is being willing to say something that's really unpopular and that is going to offend your own audience. That's kind of a job requirement. And it's something that's been lost, I think, particularly in the last 6 or 7 years or so. But this idea of journalists sticking up for one another and sticking up for civil liberties, which used to be a no-brainer issue in this profession, again, it's gone. It's just something that has disappeared entirely from the business.
Well, you know what's particularly different about what happened to you is that you kept getting hammered like, what's your source, what's your source, what's your source? And look, and a journalist is obliged to keep a source, confidential, and that has an important function. I don't like anonymous sources, but what's different here is that you want to know a source if someone's coming in saying, someone else told me this, then you want to know the source. But you weren't doing that. You were presenting evidence that showed what was being said. I mean, you were delivering it. It's so different. So your source was irrelevant.
Right, the sources are relevant, and look, it's not exactly a Sherlock Holmes mystery what the sourcing arrangement is here, but that's not the issue. The issue is it's more for the next person who calls me than my current sources. They have to know that when you make an attribution agreement that you won't break the deal. And for members of Congress to not understand that you just can't go there with journalists, you can't ask them to violate a confidence on television. It's not my deal to break. I mean, I think as you know, the rules are you have to ask permission before you do that, and I didn't have permission, so it's a question I can't answer. They had to understand that, and yet they kept going there over and over again, which was very strange.
Matt Taibbi, thank you very much, and I'll defend you. I thought you did great work. I thought you beat the rest of us to a big story, and it's up to the readers, viewers, everybody else. They can see how much the federal government was working with the social media, make their own decision on it. But you just delivered it to them like a journalist, and I appreciate your work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me.